Okay, when you think about synapses, right, you got to think about like all the places that these, presynaptic, axon terminals can meet up with the membrane of what we call the postsynaptic or next cell, right? So if you look at, where the membrane actually is, right? We talked earlier about the dendrites being important for the input of both inhibitory and excitatory, chemical synapses. And the dendrites are, typically thought of as the input because, they are the most surface area membrane, basically, of the entire neuron. There's especially on some of these neurons that are really elaborately arborized, with many, many, many dendrites and many dendritic spines, right, that come from exposure often to enriched environments. Lots and lots of potential, synaptic, postsynaptic sites, right? And what's interesting is you have in one single neuron, typically up to 10,000 distinct synaptic connections. So the majority of them are going to be, where there's the most surface area, which is out here on the dendrites. So we call these, synapses that are formed from the axon terminal of one neuron, or this one hanging around my arm, to the dendrite, to a dendrite, let's say on the next or postsynaptic cell. We call that an axodendritic synapse. And the majority of synapses are typically, there are going to be some exceptions, but typically axodendritic. And actually the majority of those axodendritic synapses tend to be excitatory. They tend to have sort of excitatory inputs. Now, the neuron, or the first neuron, the presynaptic terminal, I lost the cell body on this one, but the presynaptic terminal can also make a synapse. It's just the axon terminals here. A terminal can actually make a connection onto the soma membrane, right, of the next cell, the postsynaptic cell. We call this an axosomatic, connection, axosomatic synapse. And then finally, you can have what's called the axoaxonic. So you can have an actual, synaptic connection way down here on an axon or axon collateral, basically that can, typically inhibit. So the majority of those axoaxonic kind of synapses tend to be inhibitory. So if there's like a decision that's been made up here at the axon hillock and there's an action potential racing down towards here, well, this is one way potentially that you could cut that signal off at the pass here, right before it gets to the axon terminals and results in the release of neurotransmitter. So there's axodendritic synapses, there's axosomatic synapses onto the soma, and then there are, rarer, but they do exist, these axoaxonic synapses that tend to